In recent years, crime in this country has grown 9 times as fast as population. At the current rate, the crimes of violence in America will double by 1972. We cannot accept that kind of future for America. We owe it to the decent and law-abiding citizens of America to take the offensive against the criminal forces that threaten their peace and their security, and to rebuild respect for law across this country. I pledge to you, the wave of crime is not going to be the wave of the future in America.
And that was a Nixon advert during the 1968 election. That really paints a picture of America in unrest, in chaos, but it also highlights the strategy Nixon used to win, highlighting the higher crime rates and also utilising a Southern strategy, winning a lot of the South. He campaigned on having a secret strategy to end the Vietnam War. He fully believed that there was still a silent majority, far bigger than the protesters and those in the media against the war, for the continuation of the Vietnam War. He was also faced with a stagnant economy with high inflation. Over in Vietnam, there was the continuing issue of the Viet Cong forces in the south receiving arms from the north, and they did this through the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Through roads and dense jungles, they were able to supply the forces in the south. Nixon's secret strategy revolved around trying to cut off this supply chain. Called Operation Menu, it involved a bombing campaign of Laos and Cambodia and try to sever the supply line. It was a controversial move to expand the Vietnam War in this way, and it wasn't particularly effective. At this time as well, Nixon engaged in a policy of Vietnamization, switching out US troops in favour of South Vietnamese troops to allow US troops to return home. His secret strategy really did not pay off, though, because in early 1970 he began engaging in secret diplomatic talks. He was still confident in the existence of that silent majority and was adamant that the war would only end when there was a proper peace deal. He wouldn't just take any peace deal. It was also in 1972 when, sensing an opportunity to apply pressure to the USSR, Nixon embarked on a trip to China, being the first president to step foot there. He re-established relations after a 25-year gap, and this really did apply pressure to the Soviets because since 1960 there'd been a split between them. And the result of that was really the SALT negotiations, the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty. It showed a softening of the relations between the USSR and the US as they were able to agree on freezing the amount of nuclear arms at current levels. During that state trip to Moscow, there was also 9 other agreements signed. So there was a real détente or peace forming here that wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. Back in the US, they're having an election. 1972 is an election year, and there is, of course, the Watergate break-in. Nixon campaign staff broke in to the opposing Democrats' campaign office to gain information on their strategy, and it was quickly foiled. The perpetrators were quickly arrested, but Nixon attempted to cover it up. He didn't want it getting out, and so he was involved in it at that point. By 1973, the Paris Peace Accords had found a peace deal, and South Vietnam took over for their own protection. American troops came home, but America did still guarantee aid. Over in the Middle East, you had an attempt by Nixon to try and find peace in the region. After the Yom Kippur War, though, there was no real chance of that, and peace was rejected. Only minimal disengagement agreements were really achieved, and it was really this failure to find peace in the Middle East that would lead to the deep economic issues during the 1970s for America and the world. But the conflict was so bitter, perhaps no one would have been able to find peace. From 1970 onwards, in Chile, we had a socialist elected to power, Salvador Allende. He nationalised American mining companies, which of course America didn't like, so they cut off international aid and tried to discourage investment. They also actively funded opposition groups and tried to make connections with military officials in destabilisation efforts. And the payoff of that was the Chilean army coup. With US support, the Chilean army, led by Pinochet, took control of Chile. This was not the only intervention made by America in South America. Bolivia, Peru, and Argentina are all victims of America's interventions. I just chose Chile because it's a prominent example. Smiling Buddha. India becomes a nuclear power. And at this point in the timeline, nuclear proliferation has not been stopped. Israel also, unofficially, is probably a nuclear-armed state.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
So back in America, increasing investigation into the Watergate break-in is leading to questions around Nixon's innocence. Nixon denies these claims, but ultimately, after the Nixon tapes are released, he is impeached.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
So overall, Nixon did have some successes. SALT proved an important step in reducing the tensions between the superpowers, and the successful re-establishment of relations with China after 25 years did bring the USSR to the negotiation table. The containment of communism in Chile and other South American countries can also be considered a success, as well as the end of the Vietnam War. However, the failure to broker peace in the Middle East, as well as the Watergate scandal, destroyed the trust many had for the government.
Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.